Welcome to Ladies of Another View on Back. I am Mary, and we have a special show today. It's called The Pathway to the Greatest Growth in the Nation. It's about Watford City. We have community leaders here. You're not going to want to miss it. Take a look at some of the views from Watford City. You're going to hear from community leaders and how they handled the growth and what they wanted it to look like after the dust settled. This entire show is brought to you by the Watford City Chamber. You know, for less than $1 a day, you can go ahead and join the chamber and get in on all of the good things that they have to offer. But you're not going to want to miss this. We have all kinds of activities in Watford City. It's a great place for tourism. It's a great place to move your family. It's a great place to just go and visit for a weekend and stay for a lifetime. Oil and agriculture is the main industry up there. So you're going to go down the street and run into cowboys and do a little bit of shopping and just check out Watford City. And now we are joined by Lieutenant Governor Brent Sanford, Pat Bertinelli, and Jean Veter. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you, Mary.
You know, it's been so amazing because there's so many people that had such integral parts. I mean, first of all, we should start out by saying we have this show because, Pat, you came up with it. It's the pathway to the greatest growth in the nation.
I've been in Watford City for 10 years and had a front row seat to some of the things that these two gentlemen and others have contributed back to our community. It's been an amazing and exhilarating ride, and we just thought it would be great to talk about it here today. So thanks for having us, Mary.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you were all able to make it. So, Lieutenant Governor, you have quite the history from Watford City. You grew up there, right?
Yes.
And you were the mayor?
Yes.
And now you're the Lieutenant Governor. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you saw when this was coming?
So rewind to the year 2000, maybe late 90s. Jean Veter was the Economic Development Director for McKinsey County in Watford City, and I was one of the residents citizens that had gone to college and moved on, and got a degree from UND in accounting, became a CPA, worked in Fargo, for Eide Bailey, ended up moving to Denver and living there, and Sandy and I started a family and had a 4-year-old at the time, and thinking about moving home. My dad and mom were looking at retiring from the family car dealership, and we decided to move home. And so I talked to Jean, what do you think? Hey, there's some people moving back. The housing's actually starting to get to the point where you can't just find a house. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a good place like it always is, and hey, we're back in growth mode again. It's looking good. And that was like in the year 2004. But little did we know, I mean, it was still pretty sleepy, and you'll hear later from later discussions today that we were declining in school enrollment, but Mr. Optimist Jean Veter was still plugging, saying, you know what, welcome back. You'll work harder than anywhere else, make less money, but hey, you get to be home.
Right. So, Jean, you saw this coming too. When you saw, oh my gosh, the oil boom is back on, what were your initial thoughts for Watford City?
Well, you know, I was in the position of job creation. That's what the bottom line was, what I was hired for in that community. And for us, and for my mentality was, if you have quality employment, the rest of the stuff will fix itself. And so when we had the opportunity for some good jobs, then our challenge was, how do we get people to come and live here and stay here and not be transient workers? Because the energy industry, historically, that's been what they've done. So we just saw it as opportunity, and having worked in a time in our community where we were in severe decline because of drought and a declining oil industry, Brent and I and the team players saw, this is a one-time shot here. Let's be the place that they define where Watford City and McKinsey County is, where oil begins and ends. And that was kind of the mission that we had.
Right, and then Pat, I know when we visited, we started with the My Hometown, and it's like there's just way too much information, and Watford is too great of a community to just let it set right there. It's this growth aspect, but you came in, the boom was already going a little bit.
Yep, it was going a little bit. I had flown out to Watford City to kind of take a look at it, and I was working with a company called Power Fuels, who was being very innovative on the housing side while these guys were doing their thing, and I thought that was innovative, but just the way the community treated me and just made me feel welcome and stuff, it really resonated with me. But I will also tell you, during that time that I came over too, there was a little bit of a patriotic theme too, to be able to play a part in U.S. oil and gas independence was something that means something to me, and was able to come out to Watford City and be a part of that.
And then Brent, I understand too, it's like everyone had this vision of what the boom was, but they wanted the city to, what was it going to be after the dust settled? How did you guys control that?
Well, I'd say being team players, and everyone had to pull their own weight, but everyone also had to contribute and then probably not get everything you want. And if you would ask people that had lived there their whole lives, someone might say, we'd like to keep the population about the same. We'd like to see a few more kids in the school, a few more jobs for our family to come back to, but kind of keep it the same. And it just wasn't able to be something that you could just manage right to that perfect spot, I would say. And little did we know there would be such exponential growth. But what happened is there were a lot of population studies done, and one of the conclusions was there will be communities that add a lot more people than others because many communities will either not want to or not be able to facilitate growth. And so what you saw is Williston, Watford City, Dickinson, Minot took on a lot of growth. Stanley took on a lot of growth, but some other communities were maybe not the size where they could put in the infrastructure and take the growth on. And so in Watford City, we saw a 4x growth, 4 times type of growth, not 10%, 20%, 30% that might have been the preference at the time. But we had to take what was going to come with the infrastructure investments, with the need for family services, for daycare, for a new hospital, et cetera. I mean, you see more than the average growth rate, and that's what happened there. So that created new challenges.
So what was the population when the boom started, and what is it now? Or how high did it get, and then what is it now?
It was 1,754, I believe, in the 2010 census. And the drilling rigs were moving in the spring of 2010. Mm-hmm. And that's when I decided to run for mayor. I was on city council, and my business had gotten so busy. We'd gone from 10 to 15 vehicle sales a month to 40 to 50 vehicle sales per month by the end of 2009. So a 5-year period, a lot of businesses in Watford City were seeing that. Mm-hmm. The oil production was happening in other areas. But in Watford City, the drilling rigs came in the spring of 2010. And so the census didn't capture what was happening at the time. What was happening was all of these people coming in saying, where do I put my man camp? Where do I put the mobile home? Where do I put the RV? Where do I put the skid shack? And the growth was rapid. The school enrollment at the time was around 550. Within 2 years, it was 1,100. So that growth happened. The census didn't catch it. Then the census estimates got us at like 6,700, 7,500, using wastewater inflows, which is a very scientific way actually to guesstimate how many people are there. 7,000 people within a year or two.
Wow.
And that wasn't memorialized until this census. 2020 counted us at 6,400 or so in Watford City. So finally it was like, we really are at that level. And that was after people left from COVID. You're trying to count people in April, May, June, and the summer of 2020 as they, if they're losing the jobs, the oil activity declined. If they're not in a permanent home and able to find work, they might have left. So the population, Kurt might have a better idea when he's on a few minutes, but it was upwards in the high 7,000s after being a community of 1,500 to 1,700 for a long time.
Well, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the infrastructure and how that all works, and with the schools, the hospitals, the law enforcement, coming up next right after this.
Come on out and experience the West in Watford City, North Dakota. After experiencing rapid growth over the last decade, this gateway to the West is full of local restaurants and stores waiting to serve you. The Monahey Trail and Badlands are just minutes away, where you'll get lost in its wild beauty. In town, you'll find the brand new Rough Rider Center, home to flexible conference and convention space and recreational fun to keep the whole family entertained. This facility has it all. Stay for 2 days, stay for a lifetime. Watford City is waiting for you.
Welcome back to Ladies of Another View on Back. In this segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about the infrastructure in Watford City. As you know, it was a small community and it boomed. It had thousands of people coming to the area, and they had to learn how to deal with that and how to build and look forward, forward thinking into what it's going to look like in the future. Their main street was just a sleepy little town, and it is now a bustling community. They have all kinds of festivities. They have restaurants. They have, you name it, they have it. You can find it right in Watford City. You know, come for the tourism, but stay to live there. And that's another thing. You know, there are so many job opportunities right in Watford City, and the family life is amazing. You wouldn't believe the facilities that they have in the area. Medical facilities, health facilities, it's all there. If you need a place to live, Watford City is that place. You need to check it out. You know, this is so interesting. We were talking about how the boom got started basically, but let's dive a little deeper into the infrastructure. You know, we have curb and gutters, we have streets. How do we house all these people? Where do they live? It's man camps. I mean, just everything from the outside looking in, there were all of these things that I wouldn't know what to do with. So I understand one of you is a visionary. I think they described you as a visionary, Lieutenant Governor, that you kind of saw this. And just tell us what the next steps were.
Well, if we're going to bring in more population, you have to have a place for that housing to go. And we saw right away it can't be mobile homes, it can't be man camps, it's got to be permanent housing. And so one of the first things we did at the city was hire Kurt Moen as city planner, and he had been doing developing from a city standpoint and from a private standpoint in the Las Vegas area. And so he knew what it takes to put in those new streets, the curb and gutter. Then you need the water, you need the wastewater, all of that with it. But before that, the county had been under you know, years of pushing for more rural water and highway development. And so these were things that Gene Veeder always says, you have to have highways, you got to have water. If you don't have roads and water, you have nothing. And you bring that from a county standpoint into city, it's those other things I spoke of. And so that comes with money. How do you pay for that? And so before the oil boom, it was really locally driven. Rural water was coming with a small cost share from the state, but not very many projects per year. And so how much can you put in as a county to get that moving and self-fund part of that? The highway development obviously is DOT, so that's very state driven. So there was a lot of time spent at the Capitol talking about those types of items. Then came this need for city infrastructure. We ended up spending a lot of time in the Capitol with Governor Dalrymple and team on what that was going to take. And so there ended up being energy infrastructure dollars that were put towards capital. And we looked at building out those corridor streets with curb and gutter, with water and sewer, and seeing what happened. So basically it's build it and they will come. Right. We had to stop allowing the man camps within the extraterritorial zoning, and so there was people upset saying, what else are we supposed to do? And it's like, you know what, you had to be patient and let it build out the right way.
So, Gene, you're a longtime member of the community. You have seen it from, I'm assuming you're a lifetime member out there?
Yes.
So tell us how that, I know you were deeply involved with all of these committees and boards. I think you've been on every board there was.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
Well, you know, as an economic development director, you know, I came on when we were in extreme decline. When I first started that job, but I had a passion for the community. I mean, I've always known what that community is. And my grandparents were immigrants. They came here with almost like this group does now, with nothing. They came here looking for opportunities. So I had that in my mind. Why do people want to live in a community? When we had the one-time opportunity to see these jobs, I remembered how hard it was to create 1 or 2 or 5 jobs in a small community. And many of the communities in North Dakota are still struggling with that. So we know that we're blessed. But what we really had to do is to say, how are we going to keep these people? How are we going to keep that money from coming in here, being made here, and going back to Denver or California or wherever these people came from? So that was our challenge of the day: is how do you get them to be here? And it started with listening to them. And Pat does a great job of that. We actually went to employers and said, what do your people want? What are they looking for? Well, they wanted amenities. And they always said, we want shopping, we want safety, we want we want good transportation, we want all these things. Otherwise, mom or dad's going to come to Watford and work for 2 weeks and go back to Denver. It was needed because the industry needed it. But our main goal was we didn't need to have 100% of them. We wanted to retain 20% of them. And I think all of the things that you see that we did, that was really to tell people that you've got a good job here, bring your family here, and we'll be a family-friendly community. That was our daily challenge every single day. So the things you see today, communities, they want a bunch of, they want a lot of jobs and want a growth, and I was just aware of the time that we weren't really ready for the growth that we needed. So it was one of those things we had to take a leap of faith. And at the time, the county and the city specifically agreed that it was a leap of faith to say, we're going to put our eggs in one basket. That Main Street development project that you were talking about, that came at the time when we were completely dead. There wasn't anything happening there. We just said, but we can't let this slip away from us. So the visionaries that were there were the people that started this before the boom started, and Brent was a part of that. He was one of the first people that came back and said, I love it there. Me and my family did the same thing. We want to be there, so let's figure out a way to make this happen. Well, the industry really helped us, but what Watford City and McKinsey County did right, we still, even during the worst of the decline and worst of COVID, people stayed there. And that was the difference from the last boom.
Right,
they stayed
right.
there this time. Not all of them, but
Sure.
we didn't need them all. We needed, I always said 20%.
Right. So Pat, you were kind of the Energizer Bunny that that organized a lot of things as well. Tell us about your input regarding the infrastructure and the different, organizations that came together to try to help do all this.
Well, I aligned with Gene early on. He could see that I was kind of a culture builder for sure. But I would say, for the workforce that was coming out there, it was almost kind of a little too good to be true. And I think just with what these folks were doing in the community and that type of stuff, demonstrating the movement and the growth and that type of stuff, I would say a lot of the people that were coming out were almost kind of like back in the homestead standpoint. They're kind of going out there and exploring, and is this worth pursuing with
Because
my
you're
family?
not even from there.
I'm not even from there. So, and I'm just going to be honest, I had some doubts too. I mean, it was almost too good to be true. But I think with just the aggressiveness that these guys did in building that infrastructure, that's really what created people, more of a desire to relocate to Watford City and to call it home, just because of the brilliance that these guys were doing behind the scenes. And I think they just did a fantastic job with that. And, again, I would say we probably fought that probably for the first 5 years. Is it too good to be true? You got that person coming out from Michigan saying, I'm just here to work, and just as this kept evolving, we just saw that the retention went way up and people were actually committing to the region.
Sure. Well, and we're going to talk more about that in our next segment. We're going to have Kurt Mohn, and he is also involved with the infrastructure, the housing, and the streets, and all the development. We want to thank you, Gene, for this segment, and we're going to be right back after this.
Come on out and experience the West in Watford City, North Dakota. After experiencing rapid growth over the last decade, this gateway to the West is full of local restaurants and stores waiting to serve you. The Monahey Trail and Badlands are just minutes away, where you'll get lost in its wild beauty. In town, you'll find the brand new Rough Rider Center, home to flexible conference and convention space and recreational fun to keep the whole family entertained. This facility has it all. Stay for 2 days, stay for a lifetime. Watford City is waiting for you.
Welcome back to Ladies Up, another view on back. In this segment, we're going to talk to more community leaders about what's going on regarding the healthcare system. As you know, it was just a one-dock town is what they would call it, and now they have a major medical facility. It used to be that ladies, if they were going to have a baby, you would kind of almost have to plan that, because if there's a blizzard or something, we all live in North Dakota. If there's some bad weather coming up, you plan ahead and you get to a major facility before that baby arrives, right? So now they have huge facilities. You can have knee surgery. You can do everything. They have a YMCA, a fitness club, the Rough Rider Center. I mean, there is absolutely everything in this small, sleepy little town. It's not a sleepy town. I shouldn't even say that. This is an amazing small community with so much to offer. The law enforcement, just the infrastructure within the community, everything that they have, banking, restaurants, hotels. It is definitely a place to come visit. And now we have Kurt Mohn joining us. And Kurt, you are the city administrator up in Watford City, yes?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And so welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you guys coming down from Watford City today just to be with us. But we were talking about the infrastructure, and you played a big part with that. Why don't you tell us what you saw as some of the challenges and what you did to fix it?
Sure. I guess, we identified early on the team that we did have in place up there, the city council, and Brent, of course, being mayor at that time. There were some shortcomings as far as the tools we had in our toolbox to deal with the growth. A lot of that had to do with infrastructure, wet and dry utilities, wastewater plants, water plants, things of that nature. So going full circle, knowing we had to get down the road with these projects relatively quickly and looking to the state for some help and some guidance as far as that went. How do you fund all that? From a community of 1,400 people that's looking at this onslaught of growth, exponentially, I think I heard Brent say, and that's what it was. So, engaging a good engineering firm, planning for 5 years worth of growth to meet that demand, I think was probably the biggest tool we put in place that helped us to get down the road. And then, of course, the actual construction, which was enormous for a town of that size to take on. I think we put in 6 miles of wastewater and water in just the first 18 months, that first building season. So it was tremendous. It was a tremendous effort on the community, a big impact, but it was dealt with very well.
Great. And so during this time then, Lieutenant Governor, you were actually asked to become Lieutenant Governor or run with Governor Doug Burgum on a ticket. And so then we no longer have a mayor. What did we do?
Yeah, actually, it maybe feels like during this time, but it's like a whole lifetime happened in like 1 or 2 years in little time slots in Watford City. So we went from 2010 to 12 when so much of that growth happened, 500 kids to 1,100 kids in the school system, and then upwards of 2,000 kids by 2014. And then the oil prices crashed. So then we were dealing with a revenue shortage and a revenue shortfall, not only statewide, but at the city level, Williston, Watford City, Dickinson, all the communities relying on those oil tax dollars. And so at the time, I had been on city council or mayor for 10 years, and Doug Burgum was going throughout the state interviewing mayors, et cetera, and asked me to join him. And it was at a point where I'd sold the parts and service side of my business and was looking at what am I going to do next, and I jumped in. Well, interestingly enough, Justin Bohl, who'd been there the whole time with us, 10 years, had decided not to run. He decided that was he'd put in enough time, and he was president of the bank at First International Bank in town, and so we had Phil Riley jumped in as mayor in the interim after until there was time. Or no, Justin jumped in
2 years
right away. We figured it out where it was a special election or some sort, right? And Justin took over, came back from retirement only for about 6 or 7 months.
Yeah, I think so.
And then he finished my term.
Nice.
And there was 2 years left on that. So very, very grateful to him for that. So then you get through 2018, and then there was another election, and Phil Riley had been on county commission or been on city commission for 4 years by that time. So Phil's been the mayor since. So we had continuity. But Justin knew all the projects we'd been through for the last 10 years. He was there with us. He was always on finance committee and always helping with the big projects and part of the visioning team when we do something new like daycare or like what we're going to do to help the hospital from the city's perspective. Justin was always there. He was always keeping us honest on, are we going to be able to pay for this? But he had the vision to see what we needed to do.
Sure, and big shoes to fill too, because you know all about finance, coming from an accounting background as well. So big shoes to fill to be a mayor. But so then, Pat, I mean, as you're seeing all of this, and again, you're kind of like the Energizer bunny that keeps a lot of these groups. It seems like you're in all of these groups as well. And we talk about daycare, hospital, all of them. There was just so many. The Rough Rider Center, and you're part of the Rough Rider Center.
Because of these guys, so I was obviously in private industry as an HR professional during that time, but just observing what these guys were doing, that's really what led to the diversification of our workforce and being able to attract families to our communities. And just from a resident standpoint, my wife and I out there walking our dogs and or driving around the weekend, there was so much development that you could drive around every weekend and see something new. And the daycare, I think, is something that if Kurt wanted to talk about that just really sent us in a whole nother dimension. If that's all right.
Yeah. Well, I understand the median age out there is like 32 to 34.
It's 30 years old right now.
30.
And lots of little babies. Lots of little
300 a year, I believe, is what we're.
Yeah, that's the birth rate. Yeah.
And so where are people having these babies at? We used to have to go to a big town with not having a clinic or just a kind of a one-doc town. All of a sudden you have this major medical facility. Who wants to talk about that?
No, that was a godsend. When you're looking to attract people to make this their home, they look for those types of amenities and quality of life that they can rely on. So you look at the schools, you look at the hospitals, you look at the shopping, the grocery stores, and so on. So having that hospital, that's why the city got on board with helping to debt service that hospital, was to create that environment where people can come here and see that, the quality of life is here. This can be your forever home. You can raise your families here. There's opportunities here for everybody to grow. So that was huge for us. That was one of those steps that we took. You second guess yourself when you're looking at using those GPT dollars to fund these types of amenities. But looking back at it now, that was absolutely the right decision.
Right. So it used to be kind of oil and agriculture, a little bit of oil, a lot of agriculture. So you had a lot of cowboys and, Western activities going on out there. And all of a sudden now you have this big Rough Rider Center with the just how many basketball, like 6 basketball courts, 2 skating rinks.
Yeah, ice hockey, gymnastics, aquatics, all that type of stuff, and just the audience that you have in here today, Mary. I mean, these guys are go big or go home, and that's it's been, like I say, exhilarating. And the other piece that I'll just throw in there too, that's really critical and important to everybody that's moving there, is just the advancement of law enforcement. At the law enforcement center there, I would say that was a heavy hit, and I wouldn't say necessarily. Well, I mean, equal to importance with the hospital and the daycare and the Rough Rider Center. Just all those types of things have just really been instrumental in the massive growth that we've had in our community.
Wow. Yeah. And you just think about law enforcement in today's society, and we're so grateful to have such a superb law enforcement community up in Watford City. But all right, so we're going to have to take another quick break. But coming up next, we're going to talk about the school situation in Watford City.
Come on out and experience the West in Watford City, North Dakota. After experiencing rapid growth over the last decade, this gateway to the West is full of local restaurants and stores waiting to serve you. The Monahey Trail and Badlands are just minutes away, where you'll get lost in its wild beauty. In town, you'll find the brand new Rough Rider Center, home to flexible conference and convention space and recreational fun to keep the whole family entertained. This facility has it all. Stay for 2 days, stay for a lifetime. Watford City is waiting for you.
Welcome back to Ladies of Another View on. Back in this segment, we're going to talk about the education going on out in Watford City. Let's just say around the earliest, say 2010 or so, they were looking at combining their schools because there just weren't enough students to go around. They were in 2 sections of kindergarten. They wanted to knock that down to 1. Well, enter the oil boom, and they have a brand new high school with state-of-the-art facilities. It is amazing just to see what they have available at their fingertips. A large football field. They hold these major tournaments, and so if they can't fit them in the high school, they'll go ahead and they use the Rough Rider Center. It's been an amazing deal. They have every kind of sports program imaginable. They have hockey, dance, gymnastics, wrestling. They even have, in the Rough Rider Center, you can rent a room for a birthday party. It's just been an amazing journey that they are on. Enrollment was so low, they were going to combine them. Now they're bursting, and you got to check it out. Move your families there. Great schools. We are now joined by Dr. Steve Holen. You are the superintendent of schools up in the area?
Yes.
All right, so how many schools does that involve?
We have 4 educational buildings now. We have 2 K-5 elementary schools, 6 through 8 middle school, and a 9 through 12 high school.
So, all right, so we've been talking all about Watford City and its growth. And so education is a big deal. The median age up there is about 30 years old, so there's a lot of students. It was my understanding that you guys were looking at combining a school.
Yeah, I was hired in 2005, and at that time we were looking at single-digit birth rates in McKenzie County, and there was 2 sections. I think there was 24 in kindergarten. So when you get to that number, you get below 20, you start going to 1 section. So I think there was definitely some planning for how we would combine into what was the high school at that time, and really prepare for this fairly dramatic declining enrollment that was coming. And so I was really hired to mitigate that in the interview.
Interesting. I suppose that would be kind of almost depressing that you're coming onto this job, but the school, everything is shrinking, and then all of a sudden, boom, here comes the oil boom. So tell us what happened. What were your first thoughts and your first sights?
Well, I think the first was opportunity, and I think when you come into declining enrollment, it is a tough situation. And if you have the option to grow, you definitely want to take that and make the best of it. So I think, talking to Mayor Sanford at the time, we were really preparing when the students were going to come. I think the growth came initially, but the students weren't coming right away. It came a little bit when the service industry came in and became a little bit more mature, and we started to see that student growth come in. And so it was really exciting. I think the biggest part was really planning for it, making sure we had a good plan in place. You can't do everything at once, so we had to sell the public. We had to do 2 bond referendums. We had to go through a long process. So we just wanted to make sure we had a good plan, and I think from the school perspective, do our part. You know, you heard a lot about the teamwork piece, and the school was a big part of making that family community feel in Watford City. We wanted to do our part and do it right.
Sure. Now, Lieutenant Governor, you are a numbers guy. You're an accountant by trade. When you see a school and you're saying, oh my gosh, now we need to build a new school, how do we finance that?
Go to the people.
Go to
and
the
so,
people.
And so Dr. Holen would explain to us, this is how much we can afford based on what is likelihood of passing a bond referendum to the public. And so he's a numbers guy too. So he knew that if you go to X number of $300 or $400 per household, that you'd likely get a no vote, and if you're at this much, then you might get a yes vote. And so he was communicating that back to the state level as well. And so to put that high school together and get the 92% yes vote that he did took not only collaboration, communication, but also getting the numbers right and communication with us at the state level. So there was loans that were put together from oil and gas funding, as well as going to the public. And so it was, in my view, it was a wonderful success to be able to get a high yes vote out of that, and then know we're going to have a home for these students, because we were heavily into the modulars by that time.
And I'm guessing too, then Pat, you kind of as the PR guy, you had a lot to do with the Yes Committee, or
Well,
tell
I
us
participated,
about
and again, I was in private industry, so I wouldn't say that I was necessarily collaborating at a high level with these folks by any means, but I was involved with that. But I will say that obviously my kids were grown up and out of the house by that point, but just the messaging that these folks did on that to get to that 92%, I was a yes voter. Despite that, I didn't have kids in school. Obviously, from the HR perspective, I knew, just from a workforce standpoint, how important that was. So I did participate on it, but I think Dr. Holen could certainly explain that Yes Committee. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, we had a good committee, and I think the biggest thing with Mackenzie County and Watford City was the community support for the school. And I think that was present well before the boom. It's a community that always supported its school. It wanted the students to come. And so it was very collaborative. The Yes Committee was great, and it really reflected the community that I think at that time wanted to kind of bring things around. They wanted the optimism. We'd really been through some challenging times, and it was time to look forward. And so I think our timing was right. They knew we needed the facility. And the support of everybody, the city, the county, everybody was on board. So yeah, that percent vote was great. And it really kick-started even the rest of our plan. When we had the elementary bond referendum following, it really set the tone, and really appreciate the community and what it's done for its schools.
And so you have 3 elementary schools now?
We have 2. And a big change for us is when we went through that, this is the second year now that we have attendance boundaries. So we have 2 K-5 elementary schools. So we had to come up with new names. We had to put those attendance boundaries in place. But really it was kind of the capstone. When you go back to 2010-11, it was trying to figure out how you're going to accommodate 2,000 students. And it had to go in phases. So we built a building. We were over capacity the day we moved in. And we built another one. We'd have to shift grade levels around. We were never at where we really wanted to be in the long term. This last elementary kind of put us where we wanted to be with configuration. We got K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12. And now we can kind of build more elementaries or build on the buildings we have now. But it was a long process, and I think it's just making sure people have the patience for that, because it is tough to pass a bond, open a building, and you're at capacity on day one. You have to sell them on the vision.
Sure, and something that we haven't talked in any of the segments is language barrier. You have students in your school system that don't necessarily have English as their first language.
Absolutely, and that's been really a fun experience. Going back 8 years, we didn't have any students that qualified for the EL program, and that was one of the populations that really grew quickly. We're over 200 students now, so about 13% of our population is EL.
And what does EL stand for?
English language learner.
Okay.
The English is not the primary language, and so we have to provide additional supports to make sure that that language is not an obstacle for their learning. And so we've gone from one EL teacher to 5 and 5 aides. So we have a department of 11 staff now in that EL department. But it's really been a plus for the school district. It provided that diversity piece. I know early on we got a lot of press for, I think we had 49 states represented in our school building. We had a big map at our elementary school. So we became very culturally diverse in a short period of time.
Great.
And we tried to embrace it and make people welcome. And so our EL population is really something that does kind of stand out for us right now.
Sure. And just a few seconds along with that, we got some great restaurants up there too. Some
Yeah.
just the different diverse foods that are available.
I'd like to say one thing. One of our workers at the Rough Rider Center brought in a picture from her daughter's kindergarten class last year, and just everything that we're talking about here today, what just meant the most to me is there was a map of where are these kids from, and it used to be everywhere else, but that is no longer the story. The story is that these kids are from North Dakota.
Right.
From Watford City.
Watford City, North
That
Dakota.
is amazing. You guys are just completely blessed. I mean, when you think about the blessing and the curses, and this is a blessing, and you think that, oh my gosh, how are we going to do it? And all of a sudden, everything turns into a blessing. We're going to come right back after this, and we're going to talk to a couple students from the Ambassador Program. That's right after this.
Come on out and experience the West in Watford City, North Dakota. After experiencing rapid growth over the last decade, this gateway to the West is full of local restaurants and stores waiting to serve you. The Monahey Trail and Badlands are just minutes away, where you will get lost in its wild beauty. In town, you'll find the brand new Rough Rider Center, home to flexible conference and convention space and recreational fun to keep the whole family entertained. This facility has it all. Stay for 2 days, stay for a lifetime. Watford City is waiting for you.
Welcome back to Ladies of Another View on Back. In this segment, we're going to talk to a couple of the students from Watford City High School. They're in the Ambassador Program, so we're going to hear what that's all about. But basically, you know, they're also going to share why they think you should visit Watford City and why you should bring your family there. They talk about the school, they talk about the Rough Rider Center, they talk about all the activities, but the one thing that we take away from Watford City is the friendliness, about how welcoming they are. This entire show has been brought to you by the Watford City Chamber of Commerce. They have really reached out to the community. They share everything. It's a great organization to be a part of. For less than $1 a day for a year, I tell you what, it's the place to be, thanks to the Chamber. And now for our final segment, we have Allie Cross and Savannah Olson with us. Welcome to the show, ladies. Oh, you're welcome. I'm so excited because when Pat had talked about the Ambassador Program, he said, I just have too many students to choose from. But Pat, why don't we start with you? Tell us what the Ambassador Program is and how that got started.
Thank you, Mary. It got started, I was in private industry, and getting people to come to Watford City, a lot of times we'd get people that just say, hey, I'm just out there to work. And so I had engaged the school to see, and found out that these guys really love the school and they like being there. So I asked them to join my team, and as I'm recruiting people to the state of North Dakota, I just asked if they'd have a conversation with an out-of-state sophomore that's considering moving to our community to, assure them that if they do come to our community, that these folks would help integrate them and get them connected, and just share their journey. So it started from there, and then as I got to know these kids, they're influencers, they're purpose-driven, and we just found a whole spectrum of things that we could do, from inspiring our youth to helping mental health to promoting an active lifestyle. And so they've done some fantastic things, and we really have no boundaries. It's really taken who they are as human beings and figuring out how do we advocate, what's important to them. So they're doing a great job, and we're just having a blast with the various programs that we have. So it's I would kind of refer to it as an integration program.
Great. So Allie, tell us what you like about the Ambassador Program. What drew you to it?
So the Ambassador Program allows for us to have a voice in our community, and find out all these different connections and things that are out there in our state. And it also, we have 4 different schools in our town, and it connects all 4 schools with each other, so we know when games are going on and stuff, and we can all support each other.
Great. And so what is your favorite part?
My favorite part, I'd have to say, is being able to meet all the industry leaders. It's really cool just meeting everybody, and also the buddy program is a really cool aspect of it, because we get to meet all of these younger kids that are in the elementary school and really connect with them.
Right, and you guys have something too, it's called a Crude Life Post. What is that about, a podcast?
I was on a podcast earlier this summer. There was 3 other ambassadors, I think, on it. And we just got to share our experiences and like what we've done in our community.
And Mary, kind of what we're trying to showcase too is these guys are having a good experience. They're part of our team, and what we're really building in Watford City is a culture that we certainly expect that other people would want to be a part of, and these guys are part of our team, you know, to get that message out and that connectivity and sense of belonging.
Sure. So Savannah, when someone comes to, they say, hey, we're going to move our family here, and they say we have a sophomore or even a freshman or just some elementary kids, what is it that the Ambassador Club does?
We try and set up tours and really welcome them to Watford City, show them that it is a great place to raise their kids, and we have so many things going on, so many activities that they could be a part of, just really include them in Watford City.
And so, Allie, what do you think the benefits are as far as what have you heard from some of the kids that maybe you guys have given tours to?
They just say like they feel a lot more connected because a lot of the kids like coming to us have been to different schools and like haven't felt like they belonged in their community. And so now we're giving them that sense of belonging.
Oh, that's amazing. And so when you guys talk about what your community has to offer, you can't both talk at the same time. So Savannah, why don't you go first? What do you tell them that you have to offer?
I'd say we have to offer a wide variety of, jobs. There's so many jobs that you could do, and we also have a wide variety of sports, different clubs to be a part of. There's so many options that Watford City has to offer that it's overwhelming, I'd say.
Right. And so, Allie, what are your favorite things? What would you tell them that they could do here?
I think my favorite things is like our sports and our clubs, because you get to meet so many different people and just find something to do.
Sure. So I understand you guys have 2 ice arenas, but one has a bigger scoreboard than the other?
Yeah.
One does?
Dave Hansen, yep.
Okay. What was the other? There's 2 arenas.
Ardenburg. Yep.
Okay. So
Yep.
shout out to the hockey program up there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2 leaders.
Yes. And well, Pat, why don't you kind of tell us a little bit more about the Ambassador Program, or what do you want our viewers to learn?
When you look at people coming into our community and just that connectivity and stuff, Savannah was one of our teams. We've got multiple high school students. We'll go visit 500 elementary kids in a 2-hour period during their lunch hour. And Savannah has participated on that, but we'll have a one-on-one conversation with each of those K through 5th graders and hand them a little note and say, we need you. And just with the influence that these young leaders have, our Parks and Rec basketball program is up 40%. Allie on the Little Buddy program, they're having such a humongous impact to these little people and creating a great experience. I was over at the elementary school one day, and this little kid comes in to the front desk and he said, is today Little Buddy program day? Yep. Well, he's not here yet. So it's so important, and the thing that I just love about what these guys are doing is that they can visually and see the impact of their influence with the growth of our programs and getting people connected into these programs, and they're seeing the impact of their influence, which is just magical.
Great, great. And you guys also talk about bullying at school too, don't you?
Yes, we do. Yeah, that's another big part that we kind of pull together and make sure that we, put a stop to it and, try and find a solution.
Okay. So, Allie, if you were to tell our viewers, say someone's thinking about moving to Watford City, what would you tell them?
I would say to come on over and we'll welcome you into our community.
How about you, Savannah?
I would say come visit Watford, let us give you a tour, let us show you what this community really is about and what we have to offer you.
Great, great. Last thoughts from you, Pat.
Both of these students want to be nurses, and so one thing that we're building into this program too, I'm grateful to serve on the Governor's Workforce Council, so I'm kind of connected to what's happening out there across the state. We're having conversations about those in-demand jobs, so part of that, as I get to know these students and finding out what they want to be and stay in North Dakota, all that stuff, we're working on some of those dynamics as well, and even working with some of our alumni ambassadors to make sure that these guys have a seamless pathway to their journey and coming back and serving in an occupation that allows them to come back home.
Right, and I understand that you guys have, you're trying to have people learn the trades,
Yep.
and that also if they graduate from Watford City High School, they get free college tuition at Williston State.
Yep. Yeah, shout out to Kent Ellis and Marilyn Kipp and Daniel Stanberg, just very instrumental in bringing this T4, tools, trades, torque, and tech. We have a great program where we fill up the majority of our arena, and just the space in our Rough Rider Center with bucket trucks, simulated welding, all that type of stuff. So it's just fantastic. And then a shout out to Amy Polifka, high school teacher. She's our co-advisor for this ambassador program. This program would not be possible without her going above and beyond to help us.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for being here today, all the guests that we had, and for you viewers. I hope that you have learned something about a community that had the greatest growth in the nation, and it was right here in North Dakota. We'll see you next time on Ladies of Another View on Back.
Come on out and experience the West in Watford City, North Dakota. After experiencing rapid growth over the last decade, this gateway to the West is full of local restaurants and stores waiting to serve you. The Monahey Trail and Badlands are just minutes away, where you will get lost in its wild beauty. In town, you'll find the brand new Rough Rider Center, home to flexible conference and convention space and recreational fun to keep the whole family entertained. This facility has it all. Stay for 2 days, stay for a lifetime. Watford City is waiting for you.